All right, we're up at the Mishnah DAF Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph. So yeah, we continue learning after you guys leave. We still go weiter.
I wasn't even here.
Okay, so we're on DAF Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph. We're at the Mishnah, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So let's move quickly. We're continuing along our discussion of putting out a fire, not putting out a fire, but saving items in your house when your house is burning down. What can you save and what can you not save, and how can you save them? Matzilin sal maleki karos, afal pi sheyesh bo mea seudos. You're allowed to save, contrary to what we learned previously, that you're only allowed to save 3 seudos worth for Shabbos. Here the Mishnah says that as long as you have one basket, you can save as much as you need, even for 100 meals. The eagle shel tvela, the chavish shel yayin. You can even save a full wheel of pressed figs, which is usually like last few months, usually, or weeks, and a whole barrel of wine. And you can say to other people, if there's leftover food, come, chevra, take whatever you like. Take for yourselves. And if they're smart, if they're sharp, they'll make a cheshbon with him after Shabbos to calculate how much the balabayas owes them for their labor. So the Gemara will explain this. Okay? Now, lehechen matzilin oso. So now the Gemara's question is, where are you allowed to remove these items that we've discussed? Where can you take them to? So lechatzer hamu'urevis, you can only take them out to an area where there's an eruv. So the question, of course, is, well, if there's an eruv, then why is there any limitation at all? We had discussed this before, but the Gemara will revisit that. And Ben Beseira Omer Afal Shein Murevis, he says no, as long as it's just a regular carmelis, even if there's no eruv, it's perfectly fine. A courtyard is perfectly fine without an eruv, because the Chachamim suspended the Yisur of carrying in this kind of carmelis in a situation where there's this large loss involved. Ulasham Motzi Kol Kalei Tashmisho. The Mishnah continues and it says that to this area you're allowed to also carry out all of your eating utensils, such as your plates, your cups, your saucers, etc. Belovesh kol ma sheyochel lilvosh. You can put on any garment that you like in order to save your clothing. Ve'otev kol ma sheyochel latov, and you can wrap yourself with anything that you can wrap yourself. So let's say you have 5 sweaters. You can put on all 5 sweaters. If you have 5 pairs of pants, you can put on all 5 pairs of pants and walk out that way, even though it looks a little weird. You normally wouldn't dress that way. But for this purpose, it's okay. And Rabbi Yossi Omer Yudches Kalim, and Rabbi Yossi says, I disagree. You can only wear, at the most, 18 articles of clothing at one time. And the Gemara will describe what these 18 articles of clothing are. It's not corresponding to Shmona Esrei, right? But we'll see. The Gemara will explain it. And then, if you've still time before the house is burnt to a crisp, you can go back in. After you take off your wardrobe that you've carried out while wearing it, you can strip down to your skivvies, then go back in and put on another set of clothing, and then walk out that way. And that's how you save your wardrobe.
It's a very slow fire.
It must be a very slow fire, or a very big house. And then you can say to other people, Bo v'hatzilu imi. And then you could say to other people, you're welcome to come and save the clothes together with me. In other words, if you guys want to put on clothes also, gesundheit. The Gemara now says, V'hatana le reisha gimel sudos, the sulo. So the first question we have to ask is, how can the Mishnah over here say that you can fill up a basket full worth of 100 meals and a whole wheel of figs and a whole barrel of wine, when the Mishnah previously had said you can only save for 3 meals? Amar Rav Huna lo kasha kan bebo lahatzil kan bebo lekapel. The difference is, it depends how you're doing the act of transporting the goods. If you're putting it all in one basket, so since there's less effort and less exertion and less schlepping and whatever it is to put it all in one basket, so we say that's fine. That's fine. You can put as much as you want as long as you can fit it into one container, and then schlep that one container outside.
It doesn't have to be.
But if it is multiple baskets, then we say that you can only take out the most you can take out is 3 meals, because you can't get it all into one basket.
The basket doesn't have to be filled already. You can actually fill it.
You can fill the basket, yeah. I caught that. Anyway. Bola Hatzil Matzil is Kulan. Bola Kapil Eno Makapil El Mazim Gimel Siddur. So that's what the Gemara speaks out. Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda Omar Rav Idi v'idi v'bola Kapil v'lo Kasha. So they say no. We disagree. We hold that that even if you're taking it in multiple baskets, both this Mishnah and the previous Mishnah that's what it's talking about. Bakan la'osa chatzar kama chatzar acheres. When you want to take it into the immediate chatzar that's right outside the house, then there's no limit in how much food we let you take out. But if you're taking it, transporting it to a chatzar beyond the present chatzar, so it's more of a schlep, then we only let you take the amount of 3 meals. Boy Ravuna Bereder Rav Yehoshua. Pires taliso v'kipel v'hiniach mai. Kabola hatzil dami o kabola kapel dami. So the Gemara asks an interesting question. It says, what if instead of using a basket, you take a blanket, you spread it out on the floor, and you start pulling things off of your pantry and off of your shelves, and you start throwing them into the middle of the basket with the intention of folding up the basket and then schlepping it outside. So is that like carrying it in a basket, or is it like carrying it in multiple baskets? And the reason why this is sort of like a gray area is because on the one hand, you're bunching it all together in one bundle, so it's like one big basket. But on the other hand, there's more exertion here because you're bringing items of food one by one to the basket instead of bringing the basket to the items of food. When you're carrying the basket to the items of food, there's much less exertion and much less work because you're bringing the basket to the food and putting all the food inside, right? But when you're bringing the items to the blanket, maybe that because that's piece by piece, it's considered to be more piecemeal, and therefore we'd only allow you to do 3 meals.
So you're prohibited from if you had a basket, you're prohibited from going this way to the basket too?
No, the idea of the basket is the basket's transportable. The blanket is not transportable. That's the issue. Yeah. So the Gemara answers. So Tashma mida Amar Rava Ate e Rav Shizvi la Rav Chisda v'dara shulavad shelo yavi kli shumachzik yoser megimel seudos shma mina kebala hatzil dami v'shapir dami. So the Gemara wants to bring a raya from the following discussion. Remember, we learned that if a person has a barrel of wine or oil on his rooftop and it bursts on Shabbos, and he wants to save the contents of the barrel, you can take a container, put it on the ground underneath the trickle of wine, and save as much wine as possible. The only thing that we said that you're not allowed to do is lift up the container and hold it up to catch it while it's falling midair. You have to leave it on the floor. And comes along Rav Shizvi, and he argues to Rav Chisda that it should only be permitted to have a container that's large enough to save the wine that you need for the 3 meals of Shabbos. You shouldn't be allowed to save more than that. And Rav Chisda said, that makes sense, I agree with that. Comes along Rava and says that Rav Shizvi misled Rav Chisda. Both Rav Shizvi and Rav Chisda are mistaken. That in reality, you're allowed to have a container to catch that wine, even if that container is huge and it'll collect much more than you need for the 3 meals of Shabbos. The very fact, says the Gemara, that in that scenario, it's very much analogous to bringing the items to the basket where they're falling in, where you're bringing them in piecemeal fashion, just like the wine is dripping in piecemeal fashion into that container. That's an indication, the very fact that Rava says that it can be as large as you want, so too the blanket is analogous to the case of the one basket, and therefore you can put in as many meals as you want. You're not limited to the 3 meals. So Amalei Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak LaRava Mai Ta'usa. So Rav Nachman asks Rava, how do you know that Rav Shizvi and Rav Chisda are mistaken? So Amalei the Katani Ulvad Shelo Yavi Kli Acher v'Yiklot Kli Acher v'Yitzarev. I'm sorry, V'vad Shelo Yavi Kli Acher v'Yiklot Kli Acher v'Yitzarev. Right. So remember, the Mishnah had said that you're allowed to put a barrel on the ground to catch the dripping wine. The only thing that you're not allowed to do is hold the kli mid-air to catch the wine as it's falling down from the roof. So what do you see from there? Kli acheru delo aval behahu mana kama deboy matzil. So you see from that Mishnah that the only limitation that the Mishnah places on catching the wine is to use another utensil that you're holding mid-air. But as long as the container is on the ground, there's no limitation described by the Mishnah to limit how much wine you're allowed to catch that's dripping down. So you see that there is no limitation on 3 seudos, and therefore that proves our argument. Now, next go on. The eagle shall devela v'chule. We had said that you can tell your neighbors, come, whoever wants to take food, come and take and save for yourselves. And then we said that if they're pikchin, if they're wise, if they're sharp, they'll be able to make a cheshbon to send the bill to the owner. So the Gemara now asks, cheshbon mayavidite, mehefkeira kazachu. So first the Gemara asks the question, why should there be a cheshbon that has to be made at all? They're just taking stuff that's from hefker. So they're not working for him, he's not giving them anything, and they're not working for him at all. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chizda, midas chasidus shanukan. The answer is that it's a midas chasidus, that they're doing an act of piety by saying, look, even though we know that you made this stuff hefker because you couldn't partake of it, and even though we know that we really don't owe you anything for the food because it was not yours, but nevertheless we want to do the pious thing. We want to pay you back. We want to give you back the food that we took because we know that it's not something that you were voluntarily giving up. But at the same time, we're entitled to compensation for having schlepped out the food for you. So here we're going to give you back your 100 pounds of flour, but we're going to deduct from that amount that we saved for you, the amount that you would owe us for having acted as your workers to schlep for you to save your flour. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava Chasidi Igra de Shabta Shakli. So the Gemara says, since when the pious people want to take wages for their work on Shabbos? We know that you're not supposed to take wages, schar Shabbos, you're not supposed to take wages for work that you do on Shabbos. So if these are truly pious people, even though technically they're not working for the guy, but if their piety impels them to pay him for the food, that very same piety should impel them to say, we don't want to have any appearance of getting paid for work that we did on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Ela Amar Rava, Hacha b'yirei shamayim askina. So the Gemara explains as follows. We're not really talking about a chassid. A chassid is someone who completely removes himself and goes above and beyond the letter of the law to remove any even appearance of impropriety. But here we're talking about a God-fearing person. A God-fearing person is not someone who is willing to forgo what is owed to him. But he is very careful and meticulous in halacha, and he doesn't want to take something from someone if he knows, even though technically it's hefker, but I'm a Yirei Shamayim, and I don't want to take something from you that you didn't willingly part with. I know that you were under duress, and that's why you made it hefker, so I don't feel right benefiting from that declaration of hefker. But at the same time, I don't want to be a sucker either. Here I was schlepping all afternoon to get out your food for you. I'm going to give it back to you, of course, but at least I feel I should be entitled to some level of compensation. It's not schar Shabbos because we didn't stipulate it initially that I was going to be working for you, but I should be entitled to something for you having spent my whole Shabbos day schlepping your stuff. He doesn't want to take something from someone if he knows that they didn't willingly part from it, but he also doesn't want to be a sucker. So therefore, v'hachi ka'amar. And therefore, what the Mishnah means is as follows: that if they're sharp enough to realize that halachically there's nothing wrong with them taking compensation for their work because there was no stipulation initially that they were working for him and that this was their objective, then then they can make a calculation and say, look, I saved 100 pounds of your flour from your pantry, but I'm only giving you back 90 because I'm entitled to, really I don't have to give back anything, right? But I'm giving you back 90 because I'm keeping the 10 pounds of flour for myself as to offset the work that I did for you.
Would the Baal have a case against the guy?
Not at all. The owner should be kissing the guy.
He should be, but does he have a case?
No, how can he have a case if it's hefker? Halachically, it's not his. It's not his. Right. So now the Gemara says, "Ulehechan matzil and chulei." So now the next part that the Gemara is going to analyze is a little bit of a discrepancy in the language between the Reish and the Seifa. In the Reish, when we were talking about food, the Balabayas had said, "Bo'u v'hatzilu lochem." He said, "Whoever wants to come, chevra, come and save for yourselves, take for yourselves whatever food you want." In the Sefer, when we were talking about clothing, it said, Bo v'hatzilu imi, come and save together with me. Why in the Reisha did it say lachem, and why over here does it say imi? So the Gemara says, "Ma yishna hacha dekatani lachem, ma yishna hacha dekatani imi." So the answer is, Amri gabi mizonos katani lachem mishum delo kachazi le elamazim gimel sudos. Aval gabi levushim katani imi mishum dekachazi le lekula yoma. Answers the Gemara, because when it comes to food, remember, normally the guy is only allowed to take enough food for 3 meals when he's not using a large basket. So that's why he tells his friends, whoever wants to take, can come and take. I've already taken my limit, my quota. I can't take anymore. So if you want to take for yourselves, geh gesund hate. But when it comes to clothing, I can invite my friends to come and take whatever garments they want, but I'm still going back in there to put on extra garments as well. So I'm not done yet. So therefore I can say, Imi, come help me. Tana Rabbana. So now the Brisa says, in the discussion of the clothing, Tana Rabbanan lovesh umotzi uposhet v'chozer v'lovesh umotzi uposhet v'afilu kol hayom kulo divrei Rabbi. This is the same statement of our Mishnah, but it's quoting Reb Meir. He says you can put on a whole bunch of clothes, walk outside, take them off, go back inside, put on another set of clothes, come outside, and you can do that the whole day. Reb Yossi Omer Shmona Asar Kalim. Reb Yossi says no. The most that we will let you get out of the house are 18 garments. The Elohim Shmona Asar Kalim, and these are the 18 garments that we're going to enumerate as follows. You can shout out, if you have the an English translation, you can shout out how they translate these clothing. The first one is the miktoret. What is that?
A cloak.
A cloak. The second one is the unkali,
Outer
a cape, some kind of outer coat. Punda,
outer belt.
an outer belt. Kalbos shel pishtan, some kind of linen.
Doublet. I don't know what doublet is.
Yeah, okay.
Tight-fitting vest-like garment.
A vest-like garment, okay. The chaluk, a tunic. Va'apilios, a robe. Uma'afores,
Kerchief to wrap around the head.
Socks.
No, sorry, socks.
Socks.
No, it's a kerchief.
Wait.
Ma'afores is a kerchief.
Rashi says, what is a ma'afores?
It's a kerchief
Latef
wrapped around
rosho,
the
it's a turban.
Yeah.
Ma'afores is like a turban.
Kerchief.
Yeah.
Ushnei saparkin. Next to
Two leg bands.
the saparkin. How do they translate
The
that?
leg bands that hold up...
Leg bands, the garters.
Right.
Ushnei min alayim, 2 shoes. Ushnei an pilios, that's the socks.
Right.
Or the hose, the hoisen. Ubeis pargad, the 2 pargads are the...
Also the leg coverings.
The leg coverings on the thighs, on the pulkis, I think.
Go from the knee to the ankle.
Oh, then from the knee to the ankle. Okay, good. Okay. V'chagor shebemasnav, your belt. V'koiva sheberosho, your hat. V'suder shebetzavoro, and the kerchief or the scarf that goes around your neck for blowing your nose. So, all of these things, that I'm glad I don't live back then. You know, take you about 2 hours to get dressed in the morning. But those are that's the maximum that you can take outside with you, and more than that, Rabbi Yossi does not permit. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Rav Shimon ben Nanas Omer, Porsin or shel gedi al gabe shida tevu migdal she'achas behenes or mipnei shehu mechareich. So here's a big chiddush. Rav Shimon ben Nanas says that let's say you have a box in your house made out of wood that started to ignite. What you can do is you can place a moist animal hide over the rest of the box to prevent the fire from traveling, even if it means that the fire the skin will singe, but it won't ignite. So it's sort of like a flame retardant to protect the rest of the box from igniting. And furthermore, you can create any kind of partition you like to prevent the fire from spreading. So you can take any kind of utensil, it can even be filled with liquid, and you can put it up in front of the fire to prevent the fire from spreading. Rabbi Yossi osa b'chlicheres chadashim alein mayim, and Rabbi Yossi says, the only limitation that I would have with that is that you're not allowed to take a new earthenware vessel that is filled with water and place it in front of the fire. The reason because invariably what's going to happen is that when the fire heats up the earthenware, it's going to shatter, the water will spill out, and it's going to extinguish the fire. So Rabbi Yossi holds that even though this is just a causative act, you're not allowed to do a causative act to extinguish a fire. To stop a fire from spreading, everyone agrees that you're allowed to do. But to do something that's going to cause the fire to be extinguished, that you're not allowed to do.
Are you allowed to pick up the fire and move it?
No, you can't pick up the fire.
It's
The fire is amongst you. You're assuming that it's in a.
So say on the box, you pick up in the box and move
It's
the
contained.
box.
I don't think so. I'm not sure that.
What about-
the Gemara doesn't address that issue.
What about to save a life, to put out a fire so it doesn't...
That's different. That's different. We've said this a number of times already. When we talk about fires in this parak, we're talking about where life is not at risk.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about you're living out in the farm, okay, and you're not living in Thorn Hill where the houses are like 2 inches from each other, right? That's the whole different scenario. There, in this kind of situation where the houses are so close, you have to call the fire department and do whatever you can do to put out the fire, because the fire could spread to other homes and people's lives will be endangered. It's got nothing to do with living in the big city. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Talis sha'achaz ba'ha'or mitzad echad, nosn alav mayim mitzad acher. That if you have a garment that has been ignited on one side, then what you can do is you can put water or soak in water the other side of the garment, and that will prevent the fire from spreading to the rest of the garment. You just can't extinguish the fire directly, but you can soak the rest of the garment in water. V'im kavsa kavsa. And if it goes out as a result of spreading to where the water is and the water extinguishes it, that's okay. So the Gemara says, Meisve, let's challenge that. Talish sha'achaz ba ha'or mitzad echad, poshetes poshta umiskase ba v'im kavsa kavsa. That here the Brisa does not permit you to soak the garment in water. The only thing that we do allow you to do is you can put on and take off the garment as many times as you need to, and even though that may contribute to the fire being extinguished, since that's not your intention, it's okay. But to soak it mamish in water, that the Brisa does not permit. And similarly, if a Sefer Torah is begun to ignite, you're allowed to continue reading from that Sefer Torah, and you can roll it, you can open it and close it as many times as you like, and if it extinguishes, it extinguishes.
So you can carry it outside.
But
So you can carry the Sefer Torah with you. If it's
no, we said you're allowed to save a Sefer Torah.
Oh, but I meant the cloak also. It's the same thing. Since he's folded it, and he can put it on and cover himself with it.
You can put it on and take it off as many times, and even though that may extinguish it, but the point that we're bringing from this brisa is that we're not allowing you to soak the garment in water, because that's too much of a direct causative act to extinguish the flame. So the Gemara says, how do you reconcile it? Hu da Amar Rav Shimon ben Nanas. So he says, like Rav Shimon ben Nanas of our Mishnah, that says that you're allowed to take a moist animal hide and put it on a box. And so therefore the Gemara wants to argue that's the same thing as over here. Frek the Gemara, Ema Damar Rav Shimon ben Nanas mipnei shuhu mecharech, but gram kiboy mi amar. But that maybe Rav Shimon ben Nanas was only permitting an animal hide. That singes the animal hide. It doesn't cause the fire to go out, mamish. But here you're actually doing something where the water itself is such an opposing force to the fire, is that mamish going to extinguish the fire. So the Gemara says in. But yes, you have to conclude that's what Rav Shimon ben Nanas holds, because Mitikatani Seifa, Rabbi Yossi Osa v'chlicheres chadashim alei mayim shein yichol l'kabel esor ve'mispakin u'mechaben esadleika. He says the very fact that Rabbi Yossi argues in the Seifa, and he says that the only partition that you're not allowed to use is earthenware vessels that will explode and the water will flow out and put out the fire. But Michlal the Tanakama Shari, you see that the Tanakama who argues with Rabbi Yossi holds that which is Rav Shimon ben Nanas, holds that using earthenware vessels that will explode and the water will spill all over the fire, that's permitted. He holds that gram kiboy is mutter, that doing a causative act of extinguishing is okay on Shabbos, and therefore, according to Rav Shimon ben Nanas, according to the Tanakam of our Mishnah, you're allowed to soak a garment in water. So now the Gemara says, Tana Rabbi, let's take a look at the following brisa. Ner shal gabe tavla, minayr sa tavla v'hino feles, v'im kavsa kavsa. That if you have a fire, like say something burning on a tray, you can shake the tray to cause this is a nair, excuse me. It's a candle, and you want the candle to go out, but you know you're not allowed to extinguish it, so you can just shake the tray to cause the candle to fall off, and if in the course of it falling off it extinguishes, so then that's okay. So Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai lo shanu ela b'shaycheach, avol b'meniach nasa basis l'davar ha'aser. But that's only true if before Shabbos you did not knowingly put the candle on top of the tray for the tray to be the support for the candle. Because if that was your intention, that the tray would be usher to even shake, because it's a basis l'davar ha'aser, it's a support for something that is muktzah, and anything that is knowingly a support for something that is muktzah itself becomes muktzah. Tana. Let's look at the next. So now let's look at the next Mishnah.
How could the tray not be a support? I mean,
of course it's a support, but it's a halachic issue. There's a halachic term called basis. The word basis means that it's a support from a halachic standpoint. It becomes a base for a muktzah item, and a base for a muktzah item itself is muktzah. But that depends upon your intention. If your intention was for it to be that base, for that foundation for the muktzah items, then the foundation itself is muktzah. If you simply forgot it there, and it was not your intention, then it doesn't have the halachic status of a foundation, a basis l'davar ha'asr. Next, Tana. Ner sha'achori hadeles posech v'nol kedarko v'im kavsa kavsa. That if you have a candle that's burning, that's behind the door, and by every time you open up the door, a gush of wind is going to come in and potentially blow out the candle, it's still permitted for you to open and close the door and let the chips fall where they will fall. If the candle goes out, it goes out. But the Gemara says we don't paskin that way. Layit ala Rav. Rav cursed that brisa. In other words, he basically condemns it in the strongest of terms. And he says that's not true. So Amar le Ravina le Ravacha berei de Rav of Amri le Ravacha berei de Rav le Ravashi. My time alayit ala Rav. Why was he so condemning of that brisa? Ilay mishum de Rav savala kereb Yehuda, v'tana ketani la kereb Shimon. Maybe you'll tell me it's because Rav paskins like Reb Yehuda, who says that a davar sheino miskaven is aser. That even though something happens as a result of your action, as long as it wasn't your intention, even though it wasn't your intention, Reb Yehuda says it's aser. So too over here, by opening up the door, it's not your intention that the candle should go out, but Reb Yehuda still says it's still aser. And Reb Shimon is the brisa. Reb Shimon says as long as it wasn't your intention, it's okay. So frak the Gemara mishum derav savarla Reb Yehuda called the Tani Reb Shimon meilat layidle. You mean to tell me, okay, fine, I can understand that Rav doesn't paskin like Reb Shimon, but does that mean that he's going to curse and condemn the brisa just because it goes like Reb Shimon? That's not a reason to curse and condemn a brisa. You say it's a machlokas. I paskin like Reb Yehuda. That brisa goes like Reb Shimon. So Amar lei baha afila Reb Shimon moida daha baya v'rava dormi t'ravaya mod Reb Shimon v'psik reisha v'lo yamas. The answer is the reason Rav condemned this brisa, said it's totally erroneous, is because even according to Reb Shimon, when something is a davar sheino miskaving, but it's a psik reisha, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen. You know that 100% of the time when you open that door, a gust of wind is going to come in and put out the candle. So then even according to Reb Shimon, that's going to be usher. So therefore Rav says that this brisa is totally in error even according to Reb Shimon. So Amar Rav Yehuda, Poseach Adam Deles Keneged Hamedura B'Shabbos. Rav Yehuda now says another statement. He says that a person is allowed to open a door if the door opens up into a bonfire, even though every time you open the door, a gust of wind is going to fan the flames and is going to make the fire become larger, and that's an act of havara, that's an act of ignition, it's an act of incineration, which is usher on Shabbos. But since that's not your intention, you're just opening the door, it's still okay. So layat ala Abaya. So Abaya says, I condemn that. That's absolutely false. That's absolutely wrong. I condemn it in the harshest of terms. So b'maya skinan. So the Gemara says, well, what kind of situation are we talking about? If we're talking about a mild zephyr, which is, it's not a huge gust of wind that's going to automatically cause the flame to become larger, so then why would you say that it's usher? Just open the door. It's not going to mamish fan the flames and for sure going to make the flame go larger. And if we're talking about, that it was like this morning when you walked outside, there were huge gusts of wind, so then why would anyone say that it's okay to do such a thing if you know that invariably the wind is going to fan the flames? So the Gemara answers, La'olam baruch mitzuya, mar savar gazrina, mar savar lo gazrina. The answer is that Rav Yehuda says that it's mutter only when there's a zephyr, a mild breeze blowing blowing outside.
Speak and
There it is. There's this gusty weather outside. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says it's okay as long as it's a mild breeze. And Abaye says, no, that's not true, because we have to be gozer, because if we let you open the door when there's a mild breeze outside, you'll open the door when there's weather like today outside, and it'll mamish fan the flames.
Can you open the refrigerator when the hot air comes in, you turn on the...
That's what I was thinking.
It's a good question, totally different issue. We'll deal with it another time. We're in such a rush today because we got to finish. But it's a good question. But it's not the same issue exactly. Osin mechitza v'chulei. You're allowed to make a partition in order to prevent the fire from spreading. So, and Rabbi Yossi says you can't do it with utensils that are new earthenware utensils and that have water in them, because they'll burst, and that's a gram kiboy. That's going to cause the extinguishing. So the Gemara says, "Lemember de Rabbanan Savri gram kiboy motiv Rabbi Yossi Savar gram kiboy asur." This implies that according to the Chachamim, gram kiboy, doing a causative act that you know is going to cause eventual extinguishing, is permitted, and Rabbi Yossi says that's prohibited. Frek the Gemara v'ha'ibcha shaminan lehu, but we know the exact opposite has been cited in their names. The Tanya osim mechitza bekelim reikanim v'malayim shein darkan lihishtaber ve'elu malayim shein darkan lihishtaber klei matchis. The Tanakama says that you're allowed to make partitions with utensils that will not break when they come in contact with the fire, and the only utensil when it's filled with liquid that will not break when it comes in contact with the fire, says the Tanakama, is a metal utensil. So here already you see that the Tanakama of this brisa for sure would not permit you to use earthenware vessels that are going to burst. The only kind of utensil that he allows you to use is something that will not break, because he holds mashma. The Tanakama over here holds that gram kiboy is aser. Comes along Rabbi Yossi and he says, af kli kfar shichan ukli kfar chananya in darkan lihishtabir. Rabbi Yossi in this price is coming to be more lenient. He's coming to say, no, not only can you use metal utensils, but you can also use earthenware, that if the earthenware is made from villages where the earth is extremely durable and it will not crack under the heat, under exposure to heat. And it has to come from these two specific places, because they knew that the earth that came from those two places was extremely durable. And so you see that the Tanakama there is machmer, and Rabbi Yossi is the one who's makel, and he says that it's okay. So how can our Mishnah say that Rabbi Yossi is the machmir in our Mishnah and the Chachamim are makel, if over here in this brisa you see just the opposite? So maybe I'll tell you like this. Maybe you have to switch the opinions in our Mishnah. Maybe in our Mishnah, the Rabbanan are the ones who are machmir, and Rabbi Yossi is the one who's lenient and says you can even use earthenware vessels that will break, because I hold that gram kiboy is mutter. And therefore, in the brisa, when he tells them that you could even use earthenware vessels from a certain place, he's saying that even according to you Chachamim, who are so machmir that you don't permit vessels that are going to explode, I hold that these kinds of vessels will not explode, and therefore they're okay. But that's impossible, says the Gemara. You can't reverse the opinions in our Mishnah, because v'hama Rabba bar tachlifa mishmei derav mantana goram kiboy aser Rabbi Yossi. That's because it was said explicitly that the Tana who says that gram kiboy is aser, that doing a causative act to cause extinguishing is aser, is Rabbi Yossi. So clearly Rabbi Yossi is the more machmir in our Mishnah. So ela la'olam lo teipo chu brisa kula Rabbi Yossi v'chisrei mechser avahachi katani. So the Gemara says you have to conclude as follows: there are not two different opinions in the brisa. There's only one voice in the brisa, and that's the voice of Rabbi Yossi, who says that gram kiboy is aser. You have to really rearrange the reading of the brisa to be read as follows: Osen mechitza bekelim reikanim v'malayim shein darkan lihishtaber, that you're allowed to make a mechitza, a partition, to prevent the fire from spreading, as long as you use utensils that will not burst upon exposure to heat. Ve'elu hein kelim shein darkan lihishtaber, and the following utensils will not break by exposure to heat, and that is kli matches, that is metal utensils. But furthermore, uchlei kfar shichan uchlei kfar chananya nami ein darkan lihishtaber. Rabbi Yossi omer av klei kfar shichan uchlei kfar chananya ein darkan lihishtaber. And furthermore, these two kinds of earth that are used to construct a container will also not burst, because as Rabbi Yossi had said, that these elements will not, these materials will not burst. So now the Gemara says, okay, fine. So you've reconciled Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi of our Mishnah holds that ground kiboy is aser. Rabbi Yossi of the Brisa also holds that ground kiboy is aser. But you still haven't reconciled the Chachamim. The Chachamim in our Mishnah seem to say that ground kiboy is completely mutter, but uramid Rabbanan ad Rabbanan, uramid Rabbi Yossi ad Rabbi Yossi. But you still have a contradiction because the Tanya, Harei Shahaya Shem Kasuv Lo Al Bisaro. So now, let's go again. In other words, we're going to have this same contradiction based on another scenario. We've got the following halacha: if a person finds himself with the name of Hashem written in ink on his arm, don't ask me how it got there. I don't know. He went to a party, he got drunk, and somebody wrote Yud Kei Vav Kei on his arm with ink. Okay. So now he's got a dilemma. He's got to go to mikveh to purify himself from his tumah. The problem is that you're not allowed to erase the name of Hashem. That's an isser. It's an isser deoraisa to erase the name of Hashem. So the first restriction is that he's not allowed to bathe that arm. He's not allowed to put oil to smudge it, and he's not allowed to go into a dirty place because he can't expose the name of Hashem to anything that is dirty. Now, what if he's got to go to mikveh? So he should take a leaf, some kind of gemi is like a hard or maybe a soft kind of leaf that he can act as a water seal to protect the name of Hashem from getting erased, and then he can go into the mikveh. One second. Rabbi Yossi Omer la'olam yored v'tovel kedarko. Rabbi Yossi says no, he doesn't have to put that leaf over his arm because he doesn't have to do that, and as long as he doesn't rub his arm to get the name off while he's in the water, he's okay. So the Gemara says, what's the kasha? You see that the two rabbis, the Chachamim and Rabbi Yossi, are just the opposite over here. In our Mishnah, the Chachamim allow you to do that which is a causative act of extinguishing, and Rabbi Yossi prohibits. Here we're dealing with a causative act of erasing Hashem's name, and here the Chachamim are more machmir, and the Rabbi Yossi is the one who's mekel. So it's mamish lehefech, it's mamish just the opposite. The Gemara answers, Shaini hasam da omar kra v'ibadatem eshama min hamakomahu losasu chen lashem elokeichem asiyahu da aser grama shari. So the Gemara answers as follows. The reason why Rabbi Yossi is lenient over there by the mikveh is because he bases it all on just the way that you learn the pasuk. The pasuk uses the words lo sasin kain. Do not do that. The erasure of the names of other gods, you cannot do that when it comes to relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you see that the verb lo sasin means direct action is aser, but by inference, causative action, grama, is going to be mutter. So that's different because it's based on a pasuk, where over here it's based upon the act of grama, which Rabbi Yossi says is always aser. So ihachi hachanami ksiv lo sasa chol malacha asihu da aser grama shari. So the Gemara says, well then why don't you make the same inference from the pasuk over here? The Torah says lo sasa kol malacha. You may not do any form of labor, which implies that a grama of labor is permitted. So why is there any distinction? The Gemara answers, mitoch sh'adam bohol al mamono yisharis lo yasi l'chabuye. The Gemara answers as follows. If we were to, it's really not based on the psukim, but rather what it's based on is that if we were to permit you to do a causative act of filling up barrels of water and making a partition to stop the fire, since you know that that's going to extinguish the fire, you'll come to extinguish the fire directly. But over here, by the name of Hashem written on your arm, that we're not concerned that if we allow you to go to the mikveh, that you're going to start erasing it yourself. So, frak the Gemara, iyachi kasha derabanan, fine. You explain Rabbi Yossi, but you still have a steer in the Chachamim, because the Chachamim in our Mishnah say that it's okay to do a grama. Why, in the case of erasing Hashem's name, they require you to put a gemi. They have to put a leaf over it to act as a sealant. So the Gemara says, Uma hasam da adam bohol al mamoni shari hachalo kol shekain. If over there the rabbis permit you to do an act of grama, of extinguishing, where there's a fear that you might come to extinguish the fire directly, then surely over here the Chachamim should be permissive and will let you just to go into the mikveh stam. So the Gemara says, V'tispera hagemi heichi dami. The Gemara says, listen, are you really making sense? Let's think about this for a second. What kind of leaf are you putting on your arm to act as the water seal? If you're applying it with pressure to seal off the water completely, so then, like Harold said, that's a chatzitza. That's preventing you. It's not going to be a kosher tefillah in the mikveh. Ilomi hadik aili beimaya, ailik beimaya. So the Gemara says, and if it's not secure, if it's not firmly pressing against your skin, then how is it acting as a protection against the water coming in? And the Gemara says, and wait a minute, chatzitza tepuk le mishum dio. But why, if you're worried about chatzitza, asks the Gemara, then forget about the leaf. What about the ink itself? The ink itself is acting as a chatzitza to prevent the water from coming in direct contact with his skin, and the whole tefillah should not be kosher. So the Gemara says that's not so problematic because we're talking about balacha where the ink is still moist, and since the ink is still moist, it does not act as a chatzitza. But still, why do you need to use the leaf? And the Tanya, hadam v'hajel hadvash v'hacholav yeveshin chotzitzin lachem in chotzitzin. But as we learned, that many different kinds of liquids, including ink, do not comprise a chatzitza if they're still moist. But the Gemara says mikol malkam kasha. But still, we're left with this question: what's the purpose of using the gemi at all, according to the Chachamim? So Ela Amar Rava Bar Rav Shila Hainu Tamayu Derabanan Dekasarvi Asulama Bifnei Hashem Arum. The answer is that the purpose of applying the gemi, of applying this leaf on your skin, is really, it is loose fitting, so it won't act as a chatzitza. The purpose of it is because when you go to the mikveh, you're naked, and it's not appropriate for the Shem of Hashem that's on your arm to be exposed in front of your private parts.
It's not to protect against the water.
It's not to protect against the water. It's to show respect to the God's name, that it shouldn't be exposed to a person's private parts. Are you suggesting that Rabbi Yossi has no problem with that, and it's okay to expose the shame of Hashem to nakedness? We know that that's asur according to everyone. The Gemara says no. Demanach yodei iluya. The answer is Rabbi Yossi says just put your hand over Hashem's name. What's the big deal? Frek the Gemara l'Rabbana nami demanach yodei iluya. So why don't you say the same thing according to the Chachamim? Answers the Gemara zimnan demishtali v'shakule, because sometimes you may forget and you'll take your hand off. And so the Rabbi Yossi nami zimnan demishtali v'shakule. So why isn't Rabbi Yossi worried about that? Ella idi ika gemi hachanami. The answer is if Rabbi Yossi says you have a leaf and you can easily put it on and it's right there next to you, everyone agrees that you should put the leaf on to cover Hashem's name. But the question is, how obligated am I to go searching? It could take me an hour to find before I find an appropriate leaf that I can use to cover the name of God that's on my skin. So Rabbanan Savri Tefillah Bisman Alav Mitzvah Umahadrina, the Chachamim say that even if it's right before Shkia, and if you don't go to mikveh now, you'll have to wait until the next day to go to mikveh. No problem, because there's no obligation to go to mikveh dafka on that day. You go to mikveh whenever you can. And Rabbi Yossi Savri Tefillah Bisman Mitzvah V'lo Mahadrina. And Rabbi Yossi says no. Going to mikveh on the day that as soon as possible when you're tohar is an obligation, and therefore if you have to sacrifice putting a gemi over Hashem's name that's written on your arm because you want to go to mikveh on time, you have to go to mikveh on time, and therefore you have to sacrifice putting the gemi over the Shem Hashem. So frek the Gemara v'savar Rabbi Yossi tefillah bisman mitzvah. Since when does Rabbi Yossi say that going to the mikveh on the first available moment is the obligation? The Hatanya, don't we have a brayso that states as follows: Hazav v'hazav v'hamitzar v'hamitzoras boil nida utmei meis tfilasin biyom. The following types of tumah go to the mikveh during the day, and nida v'yoledes tfilasin balayla. Whereas a nida and a woman who's just given birth who have to go to mikveh, they go at night. And balkeri tobel v'holech kol hayom kulo. And a person who's had a seminal emission and wants to purify himself. Now the sages said that if you have a seminal emission, we don't pass in this way anymore, but in the times of the Gemara, it's called the Tfilas Ezra. Ezra made this takana that if you have a seminal emission, you're not allowed to learn Torah, you're not allowed to daven. So a person should go and he can go the entire day, and and because there's a mitzvah to go on that day, the day that you are able to purify yourself, that's when your obligation is to go to mikveh. But Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and he says, Omer, no, min mincha l'mayla eno tzarach litvo. And Rabbi Yossi says, no, if you've already davened mincha, then you don't have to go to mikveh that day. You can go to mikveh that night. There's no obligation for you to go to mikveh right away. And the ramification of this is that let's say the day that you want to go to mikveh is Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to bathe for pleasure, And therefore, if you're not obligated to go to mikvah mamish on this day, then you can wait until after Yom Kippur to go to mikvah. It's no big deal, says Rabbi Yossi. Don't go dafka now. You daven mincha already, so there's no compelling reason to go to mikvah right now. So then wait until when it gets dark, and you can daven ne'ilah, you can daven ma'ariv after it gets dark. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. But you see clearly from here that Rabbi Yossi holds that tefillah bismana ain't a mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to go to mikvah mamish punklach on that day. So why are you telling me that according to Rabbi Yossi you should sacrifice searching for a leaf in order to go to mikvah on that day? So the Gemara answers, Hahi Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda hi, the Amar Dayat Tefillah ba'achrona. So the answer is, that Mishnah, which says that according to Rabbi Yossi, you don't have to go to mikvah on that day, you can wait until tonight because you've already davened, is not our Rabbi Yossi, it's a different Rabbi Yossi. It's Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda who says that in a scenario where a woman comes to us after having given birth to a child and she doesn't know when she actually gave birth, there's a whole discussion that we had in Maseches Nida that if you hold that a woman has to go to mikvah dafka on the first day that she's pure, so then there's a whole, she have to go to mikvah like 35 times in order to cover all her bases. But according to Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, she only has to go to mikvah one time on the last possible time that she needs to go to mikvah. And even though that's much later than the first time she had available to go, it's okay because you don't have to go to the mikvah on the first day of your purification. We'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day.